Ethan Cole had always believed that he understood the land. As a young cowboy, he had spent years riding across open fields, dusty trails, and long stretches of quiet desert. But the Arizona desert had a way of surprising even the most experienced riders. And on that particular afternoon, Ethan found himself facing the kind of trouble he never expected. A sudden storm rolled over the sky without warning. One moment the sun was shining over the flat horizon, and the next moment the wind started moving with sharp, wild force. The sky turned gray, and dust lifted into the air, swirling so thickly that Ethan could barely see ahead of him. His horse grew nervous, stepping side to side, unable to understand the strange shift in the weather. Ethan tried calming it, but the storm only grew stronger, pushing him in the wrong direction. His crew had been with him earlier, driving cattle across a wide stretch of land. They had planned to reach a camp before sunset. But the storm changed everything. In the chaos, the cattle scattered, the riders separated, and Ethan found himself turned around, unable to follow the sound of the others calling out. The wind swallowed every noise. He rode for a long time, hoping to find familiar ground. But the storm forced him off the open trail and into deeper land he had never crossed before. Hours passed. The storm finally weakened, leaving behind a quiet that felt almost too heavy. Ethan's clothes were covered in dust, his face dry, and his throat tight with thirst. His horse was tired too, moving slower with each step. Ethan tried to guide it toward what looked like a small canyon, hoping to find shade and rest. But before he reached it, his horse stumbled. The animal lost its footing on a patch of loose rocks, and Ethan was thrown forward. He hit the ground hard, rolling a few steps before coming to a stop. He tried to get up, but pain shot through his side. The fall had scraped his arm, twisted his ankle, and drained what little strength he had left. His horse, startled, ran off before he could call it back. Ethan slowly reached for his canteen, but when he opened it, he found only a few drops of water inside. Heat pressed against him, the sun now returning after the storm, bringing back the burning warmth of the desert. He didn't know it yet, but he had crossed into Apache land territory watched closely and protected with great care. People often spoke stories about the Apache, some of them exaggerated, others completely untrue. But Ethan never believed rumors. Still, he knew enough to understand that he was somewhere he didn't belong. He forced himself to stand, leaning against a rock for balance. His breath felt heavy, as if the desert was pressing against his chest. He took a few slow steps, trying to reach the shade of a rock formation ahead. But his ankle throbbed with each movement. After several minutes, his vision blurred, and his legs gave out. He fell to his knees, then slowly collapsed onto the warm sand, unable to continue. Time passed without him knowing. The heat, the pain, and the exhaustion mingled together until everything drifted into a quiet darkness. When he finally opened his eyes again, the sun had moved slightly in the sky, and the desert was silent. He felt too weak to stand and too thirsty to speak. He lay still, breathing slowly, hoping anyone might find him. A soft sound reached him first. He wasn't sure if it was real or just in his mind. Then he heard footsteps, light and careful, moving across the sand. Before he could lift his head, he saw shadows approach 3 figures standing just a short distance away. They moved quietly, almost like the wind itself. 3 Apache girls stood over him, their faces curious but cautious. The eldest, with long dark hair braided neatly, stepped closer. Her eyes were sharp but calm, studying him with measured care. Beside her stood 2 younger girls, one with a confident posture, the other with gentle, uncertain eyes. They all carried woven baskets filled with herbs and desert plants, clearly gathering them before they discovered the stranger lying before them. Ethan tried to speak, but his voice was nothing more than a weak whisper. His lips were dry, and he could barely move his mouth. The girls exchanged glances, silently communicating in a way only siblings could. The youngest girl crouched beside him, reaching out to check his pulse and the injury on his arm. Ethan flinched, not because he feared them, but because the pain was sharp. The girl looked up at her sisters, nodding once, as if confirming something important. The eldest sister, her name was Naya, knew exactly what they had found. A lost cowboy, alone, injured, and far from safety. She also understood the risk. Their village did not welcome strangers easily, especially not cowboys who wandered into their land. Bringing him home would cause problems. Leaving him here would mean leaving him to suffer, and helping him openly could bring anger from others who believed outsiders should be avoided. Yet, their family had always taught them something important. If they found a person in need, they were to help first and ask questions later. This teaching came from their mother, who used to tell them that the desert tested all people the same way, no matter where they came from. After a moment, Naya nodded to her sisters. Without speaking a word, they set down their baskets and began working together. The bold sister Tala lifted Ethan's arm and wrapped it with clean cloth from her satchel. The gentle one Suni poured water from a small clay container onto his lips, letting him drink slowly. Ethan felt life return to him in small waves, the cool water easing the burning dryness in his throat. He tried to thank them, but Naya shook her head softly, signaling him to save his strength. With surprising skill, the sisters helped him sit up. Ethan felt embarrassed being so weak, but they didn't laugh or show judgment. Instead, they supported him with patience and steady hands. Naya pointed toward the canyon, making clear through gestures that they planned to move him to shade. Ethan nodded. He trusted them not because he had a choice, but because their actions carried kindness, not fear. Together, the girls lifted him slowly, each taking part of his weight. They were strong despite their small frames, and they guided him with care, stopping whenever he paused from pain or dizziness. Inside the canyon, they led him to a small, sheltered area, hidden between two tall rocks. It looked like a place they used often, safe, shaded, and cool. Suni prepared a mix of herbs, crushing them gently and applying them to Ethan's arm. The mixture smelled earthy but soothing. Tala examined his ankle, gently rotating it to check for swelling. Naya brought him more water, watching his breathing, making sure he didn't faint. Ethan observed them as they worked, amazed at their skill and calmness. He could see they were young, probably close in age, yet they handled everything with confidence. As the pain slowly eased and his heartbeat settled, he felt something unexpected, a sense of being safe. For the first time since the storm, Ethan allowed himself to relax. The girls talked softly in their language, their voices steady like a warm breeze. He didn't understand the words, but he understood the feeling behind them. They weren't afraid of him. They weren't angry. They simply cared. As the sun lowered, painting the canyon walls with soft colors, Ethan realized something important. He wasn't alone anymore. These 3 Apache girls, strangers he had never met, people he had been taught to fear, were now the only ones keeping him alive. And in that quiet desert shelter, their paths crossed in a way none of them could have expected, marking the beginning of a story that would change all of their lives. Ethan woke the next morning feeling somewhere between weak and grateful. The canyon air had cooled during the night, and for the first time since the storm, he felt a comfortable breeze against his skin. He blinked slowly, his mind still cloudy, and looked around. The small shelter, formed naturally by 2 leaning rocks, created a shaded space that protected him from the strong sun. A small fire had been put out earlier, leaving behind a soft line of ash. He heard footsteps, light and careful, and turned his head just enough to see the 3 Apache sisters returning. They carried baskets filled with fresh leaves, smooth stones, and small wooden containers. Their faces looked calm but focused, as if the day ahead already held many tasks. Naya, the eldest, stepped toward him first. Her expression was unreadable, serious but gentle. She had the presence of someone who knew how to stay strong even when situations were uncertain. She knelt beside him and offered a small bowl of water. Ethan drank it gratefully, feeling the cool liquid soothe the dryness in his throat. Tala, the bold sister, placed her basket down with a soft thump and stretched her arms. She glanced at Ethan with her usual confident gaze, the kind that made her seem older than she was. There was something sharp yet kind in her eyes, a mix that Ethan found unusual but comforting. Suni, the youngest and gentlest, moved quietly. She brought a woven cloth filled with small plants, each one neatly arranged. She didn't say much, but her calm presence made the air around her feel softer. Ethan tried sitting up, but the moment he moved his ankle, a jolt of discomfort shot through him. Naya placed a hand on his shoulder, signaling him to go slowly. Ethan nodded, accepting her help. He didn't want to trouble them, but he also knew he couldn't stand without support. The sisters worked together with natural teamwork. Tala mixed herbs with water, crushing them with the flat side of a small stone. Suni took a strip of clean cloth and prepared it for wrapping. Naya inspected Ethan's ankle again, pressing gently to see how much swelling remained. Ethan watched them work with growing respect. They didn't argue or hesitate. Each sister had a role, and they moved as if they had practiced these steps many times before. When Naya applied the herbal paste to his ankle, the cool sensation surprised him. He let out a soft breath of relief. Suni wrapped the cloth neatly, making sure it wasn't too tight. Tala placed another cloth across Ethan's forehead to cool him from the rising heat of the day. He tried speaking, using simple words. "Thank you," he whispered. Naya looked at him with a faint, patient smile. "Rest," she replied in slow English, her accent soft but clear. Ethan nodded, understanding the meaning even if he didn't understand every word she spoke. After a while, the sisters sat close by, sorting plants they had collected. Ethan listened to their soft conversations in Apache. He didn't understand the language, but he could sense warmth in the way they spoke to each other. Sometimes Tala laughed, a quick, bright sound that echoed lightly between the canyon walls. Suni smiled often, even when she wasn't speaking. Naya stayed quiet but observant, always keeping an eye on her younger sisters and their guest. Hours passed, and Ethan felt stronger. He tried lifting himself again. This time, the pain didn't feel as sharp. Naya helped him sit more comfortably, and Ethan looked out at the canyon entrance. He saw his surroundings more clearly now. Smooth stones, sunlit slopes, and desert plants, growing in quiet clusters. It was peaceful, in a way he never imagined. But beneath the calm was a quiet tension. Ethan could see it in the sisters' careful actions. They kept their voices low and moved cautiously, as if they feared being discovered. He understood why. He wasn't supposed to be here. He was a cowboy, and this was Apache land. A stranger in a place where borders were unwritten but deeply respected. Ethan swallowed softly. "Will someone find us?" he asked slowly, trying to choose words that made sense. Naya studied his face for a moment before answering. "We hide you," she said simply. "Safe. For now." Her words carried weight. Ethan knew that keeping him hidden was not easy for them. They were risking something important, something he couldn't yet fully understand. Later that afternoon, Suni brought Ethan a small meal. Ground corn mixed with herbs and berries. He tasted it slowly, appreciating the effort. Tala watched him eat with a proud expression, as if making sure he finished every bite. "Good?" Tala asked, raising one eyebrow. Ethan nodded quickly. "Very good." Tala smirked a little, satisfied. As the sun reached its highest point, the air grew warm again. The sisters gathered near the entrance of the canyon to discuss something quietly. Ethan couldn't hear the details, but he saw worry on Naya's face as she looked at the ground, thinking deeply. The land around them held signs, small, nearly invisible details that Ethan would never notice. But the sisters recognized instantly. There were faint disturbances in the dirt, slight breaks in the pattern of the sand. Someone had been nearby earlier, passing close to their hidden shelter. Naya returned and checked on Ethan again. Her movements were calm, but Ethan could sense her concern. He wished he could tell her he didn't want to bring them trouble, but he didn't know enough of their language to express it. Later in the day, when the sun softened, Ethan tried helping by gathering small stones to keep the fire pit organized. He moved slowly but carefully. The sisters noticed and came to assist him. Naya guided him gently, making sure he didn't put too much pressure on his ankle. Tala arranged the firewood in a neat circle, showing him the right way to place it. Suni brought more water and a soft cloth to wipe sweat from his forehead. They didn't treat him like a burden. Instead, they treated him with quiet understanding. Ethan felt himself growing comfortable around them, as if he had known them longer than just one day. The day passed peacefully, but sunset carried new caution. The sky turned orange and purple, casting long shadows across the canyon floor. The sisters prepared for night, making sure the shelter stayed hidden. They dimmed the fire and covered its glow with stones to avoid attracting attention. Naya motioned for Ethan to lie down again. He did so reluctantly, wanting to help more, but she insisted. "Night is quiet," she said softly. "But careful." Suni sat beside Ethan for a moment, humming a small tune, perhaps a lullaby she remembered from childhood. The melody eased the heaviness in his chest, and Ethan felt his eyes grow tired. Tala stood near the canyon entrance, keeping watch with her arms crossed, her expression sharp and alert. Naya joined her, both scanning the landscape with quiet focus. Ethan realized then how much the sisters were doing for him. They weren't just nursing him back to health. They were protecting him, keeping him hidden, keeping him safe. The weight of that kindness pressed gently on his heart. Before he drifted to sleep, he whispered softly, "I owe you my life." Naya turned her head slightly, understanding enough to give a small nod. Tala glanced back, her eyes softening for a moment. Suni smiled warmly, her gentle presence giving him comfort he didn't expect. As darkness settled over the desert, Ethan closed his eyes, knowing he was still injured, still far from his own people, and still in danger. But he also knew he wasn't alone anymore. The 3 Apache girls had taken responsibility for him not because they had to, but because they chose to. And that choice was shaping a bond stronger than Ethan had ever imagined. The next morning began with a soft light that slowly filled the canyon. Ethan woke to the sound of quiet movement, the gentle rustle of baskets, the tapping of stones being set in place, and the soft voices of the 3 Apache sisters as they prepared for another day. He opened his eyes slowly, feeling stronger than before but still aware of the heaviness in his ankle. Suni was the first to notice he was awake. She smiled warmly and handed him a small bowl of warm tea made from desert leaves. He took it with both hands and drank slowly, feeling the soothing warmth travel down his throat. It tasted earthy, gentle, and calming. Naya approached next, kneeling beside him to check his ankle. She pressed lightly around the wrapped cloth, making sure nothing had worsened. Ethan watched her calm and focused expression. Even without many words between them, he felt reassured whenever she was near. Tala stood a few steps away, stretching her arms as if preparing for a long day. When she noticed Ethan looking her way, she raised her chin slightly, giving him a small but confident smile. She always carried a sense of courage that made the space feel safer. As he drank the tea, Ethan cleared his throat. "Better today," he said slowly, tapping his foot gently to show the improvement. Naya nodded with a small smile. "Good," she replied. Then she gestured with her hands, showing that he should still move carefully. After a little while, Ethan tried sitting up fully. He placed his hand against the canyon wall and stood with Naya's help. The sisters watched him closely, ready to steady him if he stumbled. When he managed to stand without falling, Tala clapped softly, amused by his effort, while Suni let out a quiet giggle. Ethan smiled shyly. "I'm trying," he said. Throughout the morning, he tried helping in small ways. He gathered small stones, arranged dried sticks for their cooking fire, and carried light items from one spot to another. Though he moved slowly, the sisters appreciated his willingness. Suni taught him how to crush certain herbs properly. She guided his hands with gentle motions, showing him how to press the leaves against a smooth stone until the fragrance came out. Ethan followed her instructions carefully, enjoying the peaceful rhythm. Tala, always confident, taught him how to craft a stronger knot using thin desert vines. She demonstrated it once, then handed him the vines and watched him try. His first attempt was loose and uneven. Tala shook her head dramatically. "No good," she said, pretending to be strict. Ethan laughed softly, trying again. The second attempt was better. Tala nodded proudly. "Now good." Meanwhile, Naya prepared food using corn and dried fruits. She kept glancing at the canyon entrance, listening carefully to the wind and distant sounds. Ethan noticed her growing concern and felt a weight in his chest. He knew they were hiding him, not just caring for him but protecting him from being discovered. When they all sat down to eat, the atmosphere felt warm and peaceful. For the first time since the storm, Ethan didn't feel lost. He felt like he belonged, at least in this moment. As they shared food, he tried learning their names in the correct way. He pointed gently and repeated each one. "Naya," he said with respect. She nodded, pleased. "Tala," he said next. She smiled proudly, touching her braid, as if to say, "Yes, that is me." "Suni," he said softly. She blushed slightly and nodded with a shy smile. Then, to his surprise, Suni pointed at him. "Ethan," she said, pronouncing it slowly. Hearing his own name in her gentle voice made him smile more deeply than he had expected. The day moved slowly but peacefully. Ethan's ankle felt stronger, and he could walk short distances without wincing. The sun warmed the rocks, and the sisters used the light to dry herbs and prepare them for the next days. Ethan helped where he could, learning more about their routine. At one point, Tala motioned for him to follow her a little farther into the canyon. She showed him a small pool of clear water that collected naturally between rocks. The water was cool and clean, hidden from anyone not familiar with the land. He knelt beside it and cupped his hands, drinking gratefully. "Good place," Ethan said. Tala nodded proudly. "Only we know," she replied. It was their special spot, a secret source of water. Ethan felt honored they shared it with him. Later, while Naya prepared medicine, Suni sat beside Ethan and drew simple shapes in the sand with a small stick. A circle, a sun, a tree. Then she handed him the stick. Ethan smiled and drew a horse, simple but recognizable. The sisters leaned over to see it. Tala raised her eyebrows, impressed. Naya gave a small smile. Suni clapped quietly, excited. Drawing felt like a small bridge between their worlds, no words needed, no fears attached. But the peaceful moment didn't last. As afternoon shadows stretched across the canyon, Tala suddenly froze. Her eyes narrowed, focused on something beyond the rocks. She signaled to her sisters with a subtle hand movement. Naya stood quickly. Suni gathered the baskets. Ethan felt his heartbeat quicken, not because he sensed danger, but because he saw seriousness settle across their faces. Naya walked silently toward the canyon entrance, her steps careful and controlled. Tala followed, scanning the ground. Suni stayed near Ethan, but looked anxious. Ethan whispered, "What happened?" Suni hesitated, then drew a line in the dirt with her finger. It looked like a footprint. She pointed at it, then pointed toward the open land. Someone had been near, maybe earlier, maybe moments ago. Ethan felt his breath catch. He knew the sisters were taking a risk by keeping him here. If someone from their tribe found him, it might cause trouble, not because they wanted harm, but because he didn't belong here. Naya and Tala returned after a minute. Their expressions were calm, but Ethan could see the tension behind their eyes. Naya placed a hand on Suni's shoulder, comforting her. Tala shook her head slightly, signaling that the tracks were not very recent. Still, they all understood the message. Someone had passed close enough to notice something unusual. That night, the sisters kept a stricter watch. They placed stones around the shelter to track if anyone stepped near. They also dimmed the fire even more, leaving only the faintest warmth. Ethan lay awake for a long time, watching the stars. The desert sky was filled with countless shining dots, brighter than he had ever seen before. Yet despite the beauty, he felt uneasy. Naya sat nearby, her presence steady like always. She didn't speak, but Ethan felt comforted knowing she was there. Finally, he whispered, I don't want trouble. For you. Naya turned to look at him, her eyes soft. She didn't understand every word, but she understood the feeling behind them. After thinking for a moment, she placed her hand on her chest, then extended it toward him, a gesture of reassurance. You safe, she said softly. We help. Her words settled like calm wind over his heart. Ethan closed his eyes, allowing himself to breathe deeply. The sisters were risking much for him, yet they showed no regret. Their bond with him had grown not with grand speeches or dramatic actions, but through simple kindness, shared moments, and quiet understanding. In that peaceful but fragile shelter, surrounded by young women who barely knew him yet protected him as if he mattered, Ethan felt something he hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. A hope that tomorrow would be better. A hope that he could someday repay their kindness. And a hope that whatever path waited ahead, they would face it together, even if they came from different worlds. The next morning arrived with a strange stillness in the canyon. The air felt different, slightly heavier, as if the land itself sensed something important approaching. Ethan woke slowly, feeling the cool morning breeze brush against his face. The sisters were already awake, their movements calm but unusually quiet. Naya was grinding herbs with steady hands. Tala was checking the dried wood they kept hidden behind the rocks. Suni was near Ethan, gently adjusting the cloth around his ankle. She gave him a small smile when he opened his eyes, but even her smile seemed softer than usual. Touched by worry, Ethan sat up, trying to stretch without hurting himself. Good morning, he whispered. Suni nodded politely. Good. Tala walked over and handed him a cup of warm herbal tea. She didn't speak, but her eyes carried the same message the morning air carried. Something was different today. Ethan drank slowly and looked around. The canyon felt calm, yet every shadow seemed deeper, every sound sharper. He noticed Naya pausing often. Listening to the distant wind, Tala kept glancing toward the canyon entrance. Even Suni, usually relaxed and gentle, seemed more alert. After a while, Naya approached Ethan and knelt beside him. She placed her hand on her palm, then pointed outward, repeating the gesture slowly. Ethan watched, trying to understand. She was telling him people had been near. Ethan swallowed. Someone came close again? He asked. Naya nodded once. Tala added a quick gesture, making a small line in the air. Ethan understood it as track or sign. Someone had followed traces near the canyon. Maybe they had seen something, or maybe they were simply passing through. The uncertainty made everything tense. Ethan looked at his ankle. It felt better, but not strong enough to walk long distances. He knew he couldn't leave on his own yet, and if someone found him here, the sisters would face questions they had worked hard to avoid. He felt a heaviness settle in his chest. I'm sorry, he said softly, though he knew they might not understand every word, but they understood the emotion. Naya placed a gentle hand on his shoulder, giving him a reassuring look. Tala crossed her arms but nodded firmly, as if saying, Not your fault. Suni smiled softly, trying to lighten the mood. Despite their calm, Ethan sensed that today would not be like the others. As the day warmed, the sisters gathered close, discussing something serious, in low voices. Ethan listened, though he couldn't understand the language. He could only guess from their faces, Naya's focused, Tala's serious. Suni's worried that they were talking about him, about what might happen if someone arrived. Then, as the sun climbed higher, a faint sound reached them. Distant footsteps on sand. The sisters froze. Ethan's heart tightened. He saw Naya exchange a quick look with Tala. Suni moved closer to Ethan, almost instinctively. There was no anger in their expressions. Only concern. Concern for him and for themselves. Naya whispered something soft and firm. Tala nodded sharply and darted toward the canyon entrance to look. She stayed very low, hiding behind a rock. Suni held Ethan's arm, encouraging him to stay still. Ethan could barely breathe. He wasn't afraid of being hurt. He trusted the sisters, but he was afraid of causing them trouble. Tala returned moments later. She didn't need to speak. Her expression said everything. Someone was nearby. maybe more than one person. Naya stepped forward, her face calm but steady. She picked up a woven blanket and quickly draped it over Ethan's shoulders, making him blend with the stones behind him. Suni added dried grass on the ground, covering the marks where Ethan had walked earlier. Tala stood near him, arms firm at her sides, ready to explain something if necessary. The footsteps drew closer. Ethan felt his heartbeat in his throat. He stayed as still as he could. 2 Apache men appeared at the edge of the canyon, one older, one younger. They looked like experienced hunters, carrying baskets of desert plants. Their steps were slow, thoughtful, observing the land around them. Naya approached them calmly with a respectful greeting. The men nodded, greeting her back warmly. They trusted her. She was known in the village for her responsibility and calm nature. Suni stayed near Ethan but kept her posture relaxed, pretending to sort herbs as if everything was normal. Tala stood a few steps behind Naya, her expression neutral but alert. The older man asked Naya something, pointing to the ground. Ethan didn't understand the words, but he understood the meaning instantly. They had found unfamiliar tracks earlier, Ethan's tracks. Naya responded with steady movements. She gestured toward the canyon walls, explaining something about gathering herbs and the wind changing the tracks. The old man nodded, though his eyes searched the area with curiosity. The younger man pointed toward the back of the canyon, where Ethan was hidden. Ethan held his breath. Suni moved slightly, positioning herself between the man's line of sight and Ethan. It was subtle, but enough. Tala stepped forward and added a few confident words, lifting one of their baskets, as if to show they had been busy with their daily tasks. She spoke clearly and firmly, her voice steady. The men seemed satisfied, at least partly. After a few quiet moments, the older man nodded and began walking back. The younger man followed him, though he glanced back one more time before disappearing behind the rocks. When their footsteps faded, the sisters let out a soft, collective breath. Ethan felt his chest loosen. He looked at them, full of gratitude. "Thank you," he whispered, his voice shaky. Tala waved her hand lightly, as if brushing away his thanks. But her eyes softened. Suni placed a hand briefly on his arm, giving him a gentle smile. Naya sat down beside him, her posture calm, but her eyes still thoughtful. They had protected him openly now, not just in secret, and they all knew this was only the beginning. As the day went on, the tension slowly faded. But a deeper understanding settled into the space between them. They had crossed a line, not a dangerous one, but an important one. They were no longer just helping a wandering stranger. They were standing between him and trouble, choosing him over ease and safety. That evening, as they shared a quiet meal, Ethan noticed how their bond had changed. Tala sat closer to him, relaxed and confident again. Suni hummed softly while cutting fruit. Naya watched the sky as if reading the future in the changing colors. Ethan watched them with a full heart. He wanted to tell them how much their kindness meant to him, but he didn't know the words in their language, and English didn't feel big enough to carry what he felt. After the meal, Naya looked at him carefully. She pointed at his ankle, then at the open desert beyond the canyon. Ethan understood she was asking if he thought he could walk far yet. He shook his head slowly. Not yet. Naya didn't look frustrated. She simply nodded. She didn't blame him. She didn't rush him. She only prepared herself for whatever came next. Night arrived softly, painting the canyon in gentle blue light. Ethan lay down, unable to sleep for a long time. He watched the sisters sitting close together, whispering quietly. Their words blended with the wind, filled with concern and courage. He felt a deep respect for them more than he could express, because they weren't just saving his life anymore. They were choosing to stand with him, choosing him, even in uncertainty, and he knew that tomorrow, everything would change again. The morning sun slowly warmed the land as Ethan rode back toward the Apache village. The long journey from the ranch had been tiring, but his heart felt light. He had spent many nights thinking about how much had changed in his life. He remembered the day he first met the 3 sisters, the moment they saved him, and the promise that followed. Now he understood something important. Life sometimes gave unexpected paths, and his path was now tied to theirs. When Ethan reached the edge of the village, several children recognized him and ran toward him with excitement. They had always liked him because he spoke kindly and played with them whenever he had time. He dismounted carefully and greeted everyone with a smile. The people welcomed him warmly, and the chief stepped forward. Ethan respectfully bowed his head because he had learned their traditions, and the chief nodded in approval. It was clear that the young cowboy had earned their trust. Not far from the crowd, the three sisters, Alakwa, Nasha, and Kiona, stood together. Their eyes held a soft brightness, the kind seen when someone is waiting for something important. Ethan walked toward them with a gentle step, and the moment they saw him, their expressions changed with relief and quiet joy. Alakwa was the first to speak. She asked if everything had gone well at the ranch. Ethan explained that he had handled all the work he needed to finish and had informed his employer about his decision. He told them he wanted to spend his future with them and their people, embracing a new life with sincerity. The sisters were silent for a moment, each absorbing his words. Then Nasha stepped forward and said that they had worried he might not return. Ethan shook his head and said that he had given them his word, and when he made a promise, he always kept it. Kiona smiled at that, her eyes warm and calm. The three sisters exchanged a look of understanding, and their hearts settled with peace. The tribe had prepared a welcoming gathering, with colorful blankets spread across the ground and fresh food being cooked over the fire. Everyone wanted Ethan to feel like a part of their family. As the people gathered, laughter and warm conversation filled the air. The rhythmic sounds of drums echoed softly, blending with the scent of the meal and the cool breeze that passed through the valley. Ethan sat with the sisters, talking about the days he had spent away. He told them how he had thought about the promise again and again, and how he realized that a person's home was not only a place, but also the people who cared about him. He said that his heart felt settled here, and he wanted to build a meaningful life with them, one filled with peace, respect, learning, and support. The sisters listened quietly. They appreciated his simple and honest words. Alakwa said that in their culture, unity was important and that they valued strong bonds built on understanding and kindness. Ethan agreed completely. He told them he wanted to learn more about their traditions, their language, their way of life. He said he wanted to give them the same care and loyalty they had given him when they saved him months earlier. Later, as the celebration continued, the chief called everyone together. The people formed a wide circle, giving space in the center. The chief stepped forward and invited Ethan and the sisters to join him. The atmosphere shifted into something more calm and meaningful. Ethan felt the weight of the moment and took a deep breath. The chief began to speak about how life sometimes brought challenges, but also unexpected blessings. He said that Ethan had shown bravery, honesty, and loyalty, and that these qualities were highly valued by their people. He also said that the sisters had shown courage and unity in choosing a path together. The chief turned to Ethan and told him that the tribe welcomed him, not as a visitor or a stranger, but as family. Ethan felt emotion rise in his chest, but he controlled it. He bowed his head respectfully and said that he was honored, and that he would do everything he could to live up to their trust. The chief nodded with satisfaction. The sisters moved closer, each standing beside him. Alakwa took his hand gently. Nasha placed her palm over his heart in a symbolic gesture of trust. Kiona stepped behind them and rested her hand on his shoulder. It was a gesture of unity, strong and beautiful, and the tribe understood its meaning instantly. This was their way to confirm the bond they had chosen. The people around them cheered softly in approval. The drums began again, slow and steady, echoing through the open land. Ethan felt surrounded by warmth, acceptance, and hope. The girls' expressions held a deep calm, as if they had finally arrived at the moment they had waited for. After the ceremony, the evening skies slowly darkened, filling with stars. The fire in the center of the village glowed warmly, and people sat in small groups enjoying the peaceful night. Ethan and the sisters walked away from the crowd, finding a quiet place near a cluster of tall trees. They sat together, and the night breeze brushed their faces gently. Alakwa spoke first, asking Ethan what he hoped for the future. He paused for a moment and said he wanted to learn the ways of the land, help the tribe, and build a strong life with them. He said he had lived many years chasing work, moving from place to place, never feeling like he truly belonged. But here, with them, he finally felt grounded. Nasha nodded and said that they also wanted a peaceful life, one where they could support each other, overcome challenges together, and build a future with patience and trust. She said they never wanted to force him into anything. They only wanted him to choose them freely. Ethan smiled softly and said that he did choose them, with an open and sincere heart. Kiona added that life was full of unexpected turns, but what mattered was how people faced them together. She said that the day they saved him, they had not known what would come next, they simply followed what felt right. Now, she felt the same calm certainty. They sat for a long time, talking about everything: fears, dreams, and hopes. They discussed how they would support the tribe, what work Ethan could do, and how he could learn from them while also sharing what he knew. Ethan said he would help teach the young boys ranch skills, horse care, and basic trade. The sisters said they would continue their responsibilities in the tribe while helping Ethan understand the deeper teachings of their people. As the night grew quieter, the four of them walked back toward the village. A soft glow from the fire still lit the center, and the sky above them was filled with stars. Ethan looked up for a moment, thinking silently about the journey that had brought him here. He felt grateful not only for being saved, but for being accepted so fully. Before they reached their separate sleeping areas, Alakwa paused and turned toward Ethan. She said that tomorrow would be the beginning of a new chapter, and they would face it together. Ethan agreed with a quiet nod. Nasha placed a hand on his arm and thanked him for returning. Kiona offered him a small, sincere smile that said what words could not. Ethan watched as the three sisters walked away, their silhouettes soft in the dim light. He felt peaceful in a way he had not felt for many years. His life had taken a path he never expected, but it was a path filled with purpose. He lay down under the open sky, listening to the soft night sounds around him. The stars shone brightly, and the cool air wrapped around him like a gentle blanket. As he closed his eyes, he thought of the future of learning, growing, and building a life filled with connection and respect. And with that quiet thought, he drifted into rest, knowing that tomorrow would bring a new beginning, not just for him, but for all four of them, united by choice, loyalty, and the promise of a peaceful life together.